Hi, y'all. I'm Eve with Baby's Booty, and I'm coming to you guys today because one of the biggest questions that I get all the time is, can you use that 4x4 little bitty machine to embroider on hats? Well, as you can see, the answer is yes. So you just hang right tight to your seat and we'll be right back with showing you how you can embroider on hats too. Now, I myself, I've embroidered on beanies. I've embroidered on your regular trucker or dad hats, baseball hats, and I've also embroidered on the structured bill hats. Now, I want to go over a few tips and tricks that I've learned to help me in making sure that I get the most out of embroidering on these hats. I also want to go over some things you want to avoid because you don't want to make the job a lot harder than what it actually is. Embroidering on hats. Please let me set this record straight. Embroidering on hats is difficult. It is not an easy job. It really isn't. It takes time, it takes patience, and you have to babysit the hat. You will have to babysit the hat. Now, don't let that deter you in the least little bit, because a good 45% of the business that I do is ball caps, ironically. And I don't favor doing them because it's not as easy as, say, doing patches, because the patches, they embroider themselves basically. I lay out the design, I put it on the machine, it embroiders itself for the most part. I don't have to stand over it or watch it or pin anything down. Patches are one of the easiest ways to get some embroidery on a hat. However, a lot of my clients prefer that the embroidery is directly on the hat. So I concede for the time being until I'm able to get something that will allow me to do hats a little bit easier. Now, going back to the method that I use, generally what I do is I take the moment to go ahead and hoop cutaway stabilizer. A lot of people use tearaway stabilizer. I like cutaway. And the thing with your choice, it kind of, I've found it doesn't matter which one you use, and I'll tell you why. Because usually whenever I embroider on hats, the cutaway stabilizer is on the inside of the hat, up in the top of the hat. So once I cut it out and trim it around the embroidery, no one sees it. Whereas the tearaway, I've found sometimes, especially if it's stitch intensive or the way the hat is hooped on the tearaway, sometimes it can tear while it's being embroidered, and that defeats the purpose of the stabilizer, which is to keep the hat stable while it's being embroidered on and to maintain the stability of the stitches long after it's been embroidered on. So you have caveats whichever way you choose to go. So for me, I use cutaway. It's just an extra measure of security for me. So what I do is I hoop my cutaway, make sure it's good and tight. Then I take my grid, and by using this handy grid, which I love so very much, I mark the points along the grid and the center. So I put a dot up here at the top, I put a dot down here at the bottom, one in the middle, and on either side. That allows me, which I know you can barely see it because it's that light blue, but that allows me to line up the hat where my central point designs are. So now that my cutaway stabilizer is hooped and my center points are marked, I already have in mind what design I'm going to use on my hat. Here is a tip. that I give to people whenever they're doing an embroidery on a difficult to embroider on object. Sew It Pro is so helpful with this particular part. Reason being is because when you do a design or open a design or edit and merge your designs in Sew It Pro, once you're done and you saved your design, you can print out a template of your design. You can print out a template. And when I say you can print out a template, it basically boils down to a representation of the 4x4 grid, or actually this works with any grid size that is supported in Sew It Pro, which Sew It Pro supports all the grid sizes. But as you can see, the grid is laid out. You have your XY axis marked, and it's a clear representation of the stitches of the design that you're going to make. And actually, when it prints out that way, I've already cut one, but as you see, it gives the file name, it gives the size, it gives the amount of stitches, and it gives the actual 4x4 grid. And this is when you print template only, because you can do template only and just get this printed out, and that's so helpful. And I'll show you why. So this basic cap, say for instance, I want my monogram on here, right? And I just showed you this monogram. Now take a look. When I lay this on the front of this hat, now this is a true to size representation of this monogram. Look at how huge that's going to be. Now I don't know, let's move it up a little bit. So there's the brim. So if I lay this along the brim, it's going to be a little bit above the brim, but then look at how high it's going to be up the top of the hat. This is pretty big. All right. So with the 4x4 embroidery machine and your 4x4 field, you also have to take into account the hat has to have freedom of movement in the machine. So to do then this isn't technically a full 4 inches by 4 inches. It's quite smaller than that. So this may be 3¼ inches. This is pretty big for usage on a hat, and then allow the hat to be able to move freely on the embroidery machine. So I suggest smaller. The smaller the design on the front of the hat, the more freedom of movement the hat will have, and the better the stitches will turn out. Now here's another version of the monogram. It's a bit smaller, and notice now when I put this on the front of the hat, even if I put it down towards the bottom, it gives a nice representation of what that's going to look like once it's embroidered on the front of the hat. So I did go ahead and do one of these hats to show you how it was going to turn out with this smaller embroidery. And again, as I mentioned, embroidering on these hats is not easy. It really isn't. You have to line it up. It has to be just so. Here is, which monogram? Actually, this is the wrong monogram. This is the larger monogram. So I did the wrong thing. And that's common around here. I'm constantly embroidering the wrong thing. I don't know what it is. I need to double check, pay attention, fidget spinner or something. I need to do something. But this is the larger embroidery. And look at how huge that is. As a matter of fact, it was so big, it made it a little difficult to hold back the sweatband. And when you embroider on a hat, you have to move this sweatband out the way. Okay, here's your bill, the front of the hat, and here's the sweatband. You have to pull this away so that you're embroidering only on the canvas of the hat, not the sweatband. And the reason why is, as you'll see here, it's stitched in place. So it doesn't allow the front of the hat the flexibility that it's supposed to have, as you see here on the front of this one. All right. So I'm number one mess up. I did the wrong size, and it caused it to me not to line it up correctly, and it embroidered the sweatband down. So with this being the larger embroidery design, look at how I mean, it's kind of cute. I'm not gonna lie. It kind of grew on me because I am a girly girl and I do kind of like the monogram, but look at how huge it is. And because it embroidered on the band, it doesn't fit or wear like it's supposed to. Okay, so the embroidery is distorted, the hat is distorted, but it does show how large that embroidery is. So we're going to try it again on this other hat with the smaller embroidery design. Hopefully I'll remember to put the right design on this time. Somehow, I doubt it, but I'm gonna try because it's rather late. Now, what I also did before we get into actually hooping and embroidering, I also said, well, let's try something other than a monogram. So I did do, well, actually, let me show you one other thing on this one. Notice now I used tearaway on this particular hat, and see how you can see the outline of some of these stitches here, like those rogue stitches, what I like to call them. I can fix that easily. That's not an issue for me. I just take my time with my seam ripper and tear them out. But who wants to go through that? Which I'm learning that when it's not stabilized properly, those type stitches will happen. So another plus for using the cutaway stabilizer, I generally don't get that, but it also could have been from a restriction of movement on the machine because it has to have room to move around on the bed of this machine without bumping into the side of it. And we'll go over all of that once I switch the camera over and actually begin to embroider on a hat. Now here's another hat I did, and this one I put happy embroidering, my favorite thing to say. And I also don't care for the lettering, but that's a different story. Now, what I was able to do, I put it on the surface of the hat, all right? And because I have embroidering angled, because it was such a long word, what I'm also trying to avoid is getting close to this brim in the sweatband, because you have to pull it back, and it's not like it's gonna lay flat for you because it's in a curve. So it's an obstacle, and in order to work around it, I try and get higher than that on the hats. Now I think that's too high on this hat, but again, I was just testing, trying to get the feel for doing this type of lettering on a hat, because usually I just do a simple design on the hats that I've been doing thus far. So when I put this here, that allows you to line up your design where you want it, all right? And you can leave it lying on the surface of the hat when you hoop it and put it on the machine, and also use the machine to line up where you want the design, because that's what happened with this one. I had it in a spot where I wanted it to go, but then once I got it on the machine, I moved it up, and I shouldn't have done that. I should have used it or moved it while it's in the hat look, because when you hoop it, we're going to do some manipulating of the hat, and it can be deceiving when it's time to put the layout for your embroidery design. So prior to doing your embroidery or hooping the hat, you want to use your template to lay it on the surface of the hat to find out where you want your embroidery design to lie, because this one I feel is too high. When I put it on, it's like you can barely see it. It's up at the top, and I actually want it a good bit further down. So another caveat of why you should practice on cheaper things before you actually get to the real deal. I also want to point out that this is the dad hat, the like trucker caps where the bill bends. All right. I also do structured where the bill lays flat just like this, and it doesn't bend very much at all. I can and I have embroidered on those flat bill caps on this machine as well. Again, a lot of it boils down to once you hoop it, you need to check the clearance of the hat once you get it on the machine. So I'm trying to make sure that I covered all my bases before we actually get to hooping, and I'm pretty sure I did. So we'll go ahead and try this smaller monogram on this hat. All right, so one of the first things you want to do is make sure that you don't have the cardboard structured part, this here that usually comes in ball caps. You want to make sure you take that out. All right, because this you don't want to embroider on, and that's just to keep the structure of the hat while it's in shipment or while it's in the store. So once you get that off, now you have your regular old hat. All right, now this is the smaller monogram, so I'm going to figure out where I want this on the hat, and I think right about there would be kind of cute. One of two things I can do. I can either use the water soluble markers and mark my center points of where I want it to begin and where I want it to end, up at the top and at the bottom and on the sides. I can do that, or I can pin this in place. That's very possible for us to start out with, to make sure that this stays center or where you want it to be. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin this in place so that it will stay where I want it. And what I'm also doing is using the line of the cap to make sure that this is centered with the way the hat is. And sometimes you'll get some irregularly made hats and the line is wonky. If you wanted to, you could use the center line even still, but it's entirely up to you. But that's how I'm centering on these hats. And like I said, I got these from Dollar Tree, so no big deal if we screw up. All right, now back to our cutaway stabilizer. So the way I hoop these hats without the hat frame, without the hat attachment, and like I said, it's not a simple feat, but it can be done. The most important thing you need to understand with your 4x4 is, for the most part, if what you have to embroider on lies flat, then you can embroider on it for the most part. Towels, they lie flat. Shirts, open up, they lie flat. Onesies, although they're crazy, you got to do all that manipulating and hold the fabric out the way, but the front of it will lie flat. Same principle with these hats. The front of this hat will lie for the most part flat on your stabilizer, and that's what you want. And that's why a lot of people use the sticky stabilizer here, because what it'll do is it'll stick to the surface of the hat, and it won't go anywhere for the most part. But we're going to have to use pins because, like I said, the sticky doesn't play fair with my machine, the sticky stabilizer. So what I'm going to do is invert this hat, right? So we got it crazy looking inside out, and I'm going to take the time to make sure that I'm feeling where this is. You can try to pin it out the way, but because all of this is circular in nature, it's going to be difficult to get any of this to go straight. So for the time being, I'm just going to mentally and physically hold on to it a little bit and know where it is. All right, now this is where it gets even trickier. All right, so I've marked my center points on the grid, so I want to line that up, and I'm going to, for lack of better words, guesstimate where the center is here with the dots below. And because I can't see through it, you kind of have to take your best guess and try and get it lined up as close as possible. And I do that by just laying it on the 4x4 on the cutaway, and I lift the hat to see about where the center is. And I'm looking for a couple of things. First of all, I'm looking for that center tape that shows the center of the hat, which I know that's the center seam. So I'm going to center that on where those dots are, right? So I'm trying to get that centered in. And now that I see visually that it's about centered where I want it to be, I'm going to come back to the top and I'm going to put my finger about where the center line is going horizontally. So I'm holding on here and I'm going to try and see. Yeah, it looks like that's probably about where the center is. So like I said, it's not easy, but it can be done. So once I get that where it's supposed to be, and my center tape is where it's supposed to be, which it just shifted on me, and I'm sorry, I'm doing this all off camera, and that's besides the point. So I'm putting it back where it was, and I'm centering it here. So what I'm going to do is hold it and look for that center tape up here where this other dot is, and make sure that it's centered. There's the center dot, and see the tape is all the way over here, so it's not centered. So I move it over and get it centered there. So now that I have it centered there, what I'm going to do is go ahead and pin this in place at the top where I know for a fact up top it's centered. All right. Like I said, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to get these hats done. And it takes time, especially when you have 20 hats to do. But once you get in the routine of doing them, then it's not quite as difficult as it would seem. So now that I have it pinned to this cutaway stabilizer, and I know that I pinned it centrally because I held it in place and pinned it, I'm gonna come back down to this bottom one, check my tape again, and make sure that the tape stayed centered while I pinned it in place. Here's the positive thing about having this template pinned to the front of the hat. So now I know exactly where my embroidery is going to be. Then that helps me determine where to pin the hat, and it won't be in the way of the embroidery. All right, so I can pin over here. Now, as I mentioned earlier, because I got this from Dollar Tree, it's like an El Cheapo hat. And the fabric is like, you know, kind of hard to get it to lay flat. Another positive to using the sticky stabilizer for those who can use it, because once you press this flat, for the most part, the sticky stabilizer will hold it in place. So I pinned it up top here, and I will pin it up top here. So we'll get another pin, and I'm going to pin it over here. All right. Now, again, more important than anything, I need to make sure this sweatband is out the way. So I'm feeling for it to be away from the surface of the hat. And for the most part, it's cooperating with me, which is a good thing, because sometimes they don't cooperate. And I'm going to try and see if I can't pin it over here to help keep it out of the way, and pin it away from my embroidery design. All right, and I'm pinning that there. Whoops, sorry. And I do see that the front of that was out of the way still. And ordinarily, I can go ahead and pin it over here too. So here, I know it's centered up front. I checked and made sure that it was still centered below. And I just pulled that pin out of place, but it'll be all right. And so now I still have my template pinned in place. I could take it off right now, but I'm not, because I'm going to show you how we get this on the machine and how we get it lined up to make sure that your design is going to hit where it's supposed to be from top to bottom. All right, so let's switch over to the machine. Now that we're over here at the machine, we still have the template in place. So what we're going to do is keep in mind, here's your bracket. Now you can put it on there one of two ways. You can fold this flat and make sure that it's laid nice and flat on the machine and slide it on this way, which is the easiest way, or you can try and come in from the bill. Now I have this, and I'm going to slide that up under the needle, and we're going to lock this in place. All right, now I'm not taking my template off yet. I'll show you why. So now what we're going to do is come to the machine and load up the design, which of course I haven't put it on the machine yet. So give me a sec and we'll go have it added to the machine, because this is the one that's too big. All right, so now I have the correct one in the machine, so we're going to select that. And this is the smaller monogram for this hat. So look, I got the hat kind of going crazy, so I'm gonna double check, which is gonna be hard to do because now it's on the machine, and I'm going to make sure that that tape is centered. All right, and now what I want to show you is you can find the center of this template while it's pinned on, because that's where we want the center to be. So even if you don't get it centered correctly on the hoop itself, you can still center it by using the machine. So I'm going to guesstimate by hitting adjust and layout. And it looks like, now this is also where I messed up with the other hat. So if it screws up, then this shows you have to make room for error. And this is also how I try things just to see if I can do it. So let's move this down a smidge until, and I'm gonna put my foot down, and then I'm gonna actually turn the wheel until it comes down on this template, and look to see if that needle hits the center line. If it hits the center line, then I know it's going to be centered once I tell the machine to go ahead and do the embroidery. Well, it barely hit it, so I'm going to move it back to make sure that it hits it this time, because it was really close, and that's pretty much it. That's what I needed to do. So I'm going to take the pin out of the template, and now I'm going to move the template out of the way. All right. And I should have lifted the foot to do that, but I didn't. And now I'm going to thread my needle, because for whatever reason the thread came out of the needle. I rethread the needle. Whoops. I don't know why it's going to act crazy. Let's see. What is up? Oh, that's why. The needle wasn't all the way up. All right. Now we're going to thread the needle. And I'm going to tell it to go ahead and do the monogram now. So I'm holding it in place, making sure everything's smoothed out the way it's supposed to be. I checked the layout up and down, so now the only thing left to do is to start the design. Now notice how the hat has quite a bit of clearance over here on this side. So whenever this design started, you want to be sure that you have clearance and that the side of the hat isn't buttoned up against the side of the machine. Because if it does, then all that's going to do is distort your embroidery, and it's not going to stitch out the way it's supposed to. So I'm gonna go ahead and let this do its thing. We are done. So let's remove this ever so carefully. Pull it out. And here is a monogram ball cap from Dollar Tree. A $1 ball cap, and we were able to get a monogram on it. What is left is to take your pins out. And I will point out that I am aware this is off center. I figured it probably would be, because when I was lining up the needle this way, I noticed that it looked like it was probably off side to side, but I was like, forget it. I mean, it's from Dollar Tree, so I wasn't worried about it. But you could have adjusted it on your machine by, instead of adjusting it up and down, but adjusting it side to side. So at this point, we'll cut off the cutaway stabilizer. And once we cut off the cutaway stabilizer, then we'll have a monogrammed hat. And we're going to have to double check and make sure that we missed, and we didn't. I swear, I hate. That's the bane of the existence for the sweatband. Sweatband got caught in the embroidery. So let's see how it looks when we see. And that sweatband distorts the way the hat lies. So if this was mine, which it is, one of the ways to get around that, if you wanted to do this for your hat, is to cut the sweatband. And forgive my doggy, he's out there protecting our territory from something, don't know what. All right, and that looks terrible, but guess what, it's my hat, so I don't care. And like I said, it came from Dollar Tree. But if this was a customer's hat, you might not want to do that. You might not. I mean, the customer may not care. I don't know, but I wouldn't take that chance. So once we cut the sweatband, look, it sits perfectly like it's supposed to, with the exception of it being off center. And we have a couple of those stray stitches at the bottom of the E again. But as I mentioned prior to, when you're this close to the bottom of this sweatband and the brim, it's going to knock your stitches off a little bit. You have to be really careful not to get but so close to this area of the hat here. And so when we put our hat on, we got a really hot Dollar Tree embroidered hat. We really do. And I think it's pretty swag, if I should say so myself, with my blue and green and pink. So this is how, yes, you can embroider on a ball cap. You really can. It is very possible. You can do it and be successful. It takes a lot of time. It takes patience. It takes babysitting. You have to sit and watch your machine and watch the embroidery. I would definitely suggest try it at least once. Can't hurt. And by giving it a shot, you can say, yes, you can embroider on a hat. If you have a Dollar Tree local to you, because it's summertime, they have the hats there for just $1. So if you screw up, it's not that big of a deal. And I'm pretty sure the hats aren't too terribly expensive at Walmart either. What I also wanted to point out is, as far as other things, like here's a visor. So on the visor, if it lays flat, you can embroider that for the most part. So on the side, notice it will lay flat on your hoop. So you would be able to lay it flat and you can embroider on the side. On the top, however, notice this. You can't get that middle fabric. You can't get it to lay flat. It's not going to cooperate. So if you want to do the front of a visor, I would suggest patches. If you absolutely need to do some visors and you don't want to find someone with a multi-needle with the hat hoop, with the cylinder hat hoop, then you could definitely find some patches or embroider yourself some patches, which we learned in another video, didn't we? So you could get that I Love Sew Up Pro patch to sit really nicely right here. And then you can embroider, say, your name or whatever on the side. Another hat option that, yes, you can do would be your sun brim hat. Here's another that came from Dollar Tree, which is, totally adorable with the bow on the back. So the thing is, if it lays flat, you can embroider that. So right here on this brim, just as long as you get an embroidery that's small enough, I could put this smaller monogram right there and it would be totally cute. So yes, you can embroider on hats. You can embroider on sun hats. You can embroider on ball caps. You can embroider on structured caps. Again, you just have to be careful and check your clearance. And you can even embroider on the side of visors. So in answer to the question, can you embroider on hats? Now we know you definitely can embroider on hats. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I know the video was a little lengthy. There's so much involved in embroidering on hats. You really needed to be aware of your limitations, of your shortcuts, of the things that you have that you want to look out for to make sure that your embroidery is successful. If you like the video, please give the video a thumbs up, give it a like. If you don't mind, I really appreciate it. That lets me know that I've done my job in explaining thoroughly to you how to accomplish the goal of the video, which is embroidering on hats. Also, if you haven't already, you may want to subscribe. I really encourage you to do so. Reason being is because we are a tight-knit community. I do check in with my followers. I do leave comments. I answer my messages. And I like to keep in touch with everyone and make sure that you're understanding what all is going on. And I answer questions. So if you have a suggestion for a future video, or if you have a question that you need answered, shoot me a line. I'll get right back to you. Also, we have a contest going on right now. If you're not subscribed, come on, guys, you got to subscribe so that we can keep up, because there will be more contests coming up in the future and you want to be in the know with that. So I appreciate you all for tuning in. I look forward to the future videos that we have in store. The contest ends on Sunday, so I'm looking forward to joining you guys with that. And with the embroidery of the hats, we now know that you can. So I expect to see pictures. Please send me pictures. I love to see the pictures of the projects that you guys have embroidered based off of our videos. It's really cool. And I will be sharing some of those pictures at the end of this video of some of the key fobs that were done from the snap tab video, and those that were submitted. They're really nice. And I'm very proud of you guys. You guys are doing a great job. You can do this. You are somewhat limited by 4x4, but guess what? There's a whole heck of a lot that you can do with some patience and preservation. So thank you again. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. And until next time, happy embroidering. Wait a minute. Until next time, happy embroidering.
Click here to subscribe to our channel. Click here to view other videos in our tutorial playlist. And click here for the next video that you should find helpful. Thank you.